Hello everyone, today we're talking about Nigel Short against Tony Miles from 1984. This game here is absolutely spectacular because of a tactical opportunity that White ends up missing, but it leads to quite a lot of very cool analysis. So let's jump straight in. It was a Caro-Kann, but a very atypical c4 was played on move 2. And what this leads to is an isolated pawn, right? When this d5 pawn is taken, behind it, the d2 pawn, which will soon come to d4, becomes an isolated queen's pawn. But the opening becomes very unique, because what ends up happening is that because of the move queen b3, White ruins their pawn structure, but at the same time, you will very shortly see d5 is played, and then White ends up taking on b6 and ruining the pawn structure for Black. And if we end up looking at this position, material is equal, and for example, after castles and rook to g1, we reach a very unbalanced position. Because on one hand, White has more piece activity. Their knight is beautiful here. The rooks are on open files with very specific targets in mind. The queen is active, and the bishop, although not yet developed, has a few different ways to activate very effectively into the position. But in exchange for this activity, if you look at Black, they have a more serious attacking potential. The open A file, along with the bishop cutting on the board, and the open C file are all potential ingredients in an attack that Black might be brewing. And so this position is roughly equal objectively, but both players definitely have something to play for. So bishop to f6, first of all, rerouting the bishop to what would be actually a better attacking position. And rook to g4. A bit of a weird move, but this is one of those positions where, because the pawn structure is so unique, you can go away and play more unique developing approaches. You don't have to bring the rook to the center. You have the open g file. Let's use it. Similarly as Black, you don't have to bring the rook to the center. You have the open a file. Very atypically, let's use it, right? Rook a5. So you want to adapt to the situation, and this is a clear example here. The pawn structure lends to these very unique, creative approaches to getting your pieces into the game. So king to b1, getting off of the c-file, which I previously mentioned, obviously, is a potential disaster. It could be if a rook lands here. And after rook to c5, knight takes b6 was played. So White wins a pawn, but then knight to d4. So White won a pawn, but Black claims that their knight now improved, their rook now improved. They're actually going to play rook to c6 now, and in this resulting position after queen to d7, the other rook can come. So by giving away a pawn, Black has gained a lot of activity. Now, if we go back for a second, notice that after the move knight to d4, the queen has to stay in contact with the knight, so queen to b4 is forced. And now rook to c6, as I mentioned, queen to d7, we're getting the other rook into the game. And after rook to c8, like I said, the entire lead-in activity that White used to have has dissipated. The rooks are active. The bishop is better than the counterpart. Same with the knight. And in fact, the bishop here on f1 now proves to be a little bit annoying. So in this position, this is very much the critical moment. Here, White, Nigel Short, missed a stunning tactical idea, and he played instead a3, giving the king a little bit of breathing room and setting up the move knight to b6. If Black just plays a random move, knight b6 wins on the spot because you're going to win the exchange. It's a fork. The question is, why can't you go knight to b6 here? Why is a3 important? Well, here's the idea. Knight e2 here is a surprising but effective blow, or so it appears. Notice that now there's a lot of threats. There's the threat, if you were to take the queen, of rook to c1 and mate. If you were to take the rook, for example, then there's queen to d1, obviously. If you take the knight, there's also queen to d1, and then rook to c1 mate. These active pieces that I was highlighting really begin to shine, right? There's so many threats along the c and d file. It seems like Black is actually winning here. There's no way to get rid of this threat. Well, in fact, if not for a beautiful tactical blow, very surprising one, Black would be winning. But White has one of the most stunning ideas, one of the more stunning moves in this position. I'd urge you to pause and try to find it. It's not a very easy one to find, but this is what makes the game here that I'm showing so historically significant, what made it really get into the books. This right here is the key moment. The move is queen to f8, a brilliancy indeed, sacrificing the queen. And the idea is that by very simple calculation, you see that white is simply winning. If you take with the king, we can now take the queen, but the difference is it's check. So there's no longer this mating idea. And after the king moves, we can take the bishop with check. They take, and now we take the knight very safely. And because there's no longer a queen here, they don't have the mate idea, and we're simply up a piece. Now, if instead they take with the rook, the point is similar. We have now the time to take the queen, because although it's not check, by taking the rook, they've basically distracted themselves from their control over the c-file, so we can safely take this. They don't have the mating idea because they don't have the second rook. And after the rook comes back threatening mate, we can first again take with check, and then take the knight we've actually transposed, and white is winning up a piece. So queen to f8 would have been a beautiful concept, but unfortunately a3 here was played instead. White is still better though, and that becomes clear after the rook reroutes itself to the d-file because of knight to a5, and a new issue arises for black. Now the queen is under heavy fire. Whenever there's a rook aiming along a queen, you want to proceed with so much caution, and it's possibly very often the best to just move the queen, obviously not here, but move the queen off of this file to get rid of any potential problems. Here, black did that a little bit too late, and therefore white is in fact still winning. The point is this: the rook is attacked, and if the rook moves, the knight comes to b3. And there's simply too much pressure on this knight, which, as I hinted upon, is pinned to the queen, so the knight can't move. We're going to simply win a piece as white. Now, black tried the best they could do. They played rook to e6. The point is now if knight b3, they can get rid of one of the defenders, and they're barely surviving, but they are indeed hanging on because there's no longer as many attackers for white. But unfortunately, instead of knight b3, bishop to h3 here simply wins. You hit the rook, behind the rook the queen, so you can't take the rook. It's game over. Finally, the queen moves away from the file, away from the diagonal. It's a little bit too late though. And indeed, after rook takes d4, we win a piece. And going into this endgame, bishop b6 and queen takes b7, there was a lot that happened. When the dust settled, white is up a simple 2 pawns, which, with so little material left on the board, should be indeed winning. Now, after queen takes a5, I should point out, why can't you just take the free queen? Queen to c8 check, the king moves, and now queen to d7, we're going to pick off the piece. And whenever you are up 2 pawns, trading is good, right? So we basically traded the knight for the bishop, so trading is good. So black decided not to go for this, and instead move the queen away. But again, black is trying to avoid the trades, white is trying to propose as many trades as they can. So queen to b3, and in fact, in that same mentality, in that same thought process, queen to e3 here would have been super strong. You're hitting e6, very difficult to defend because you're also hitting the queen. And so a trade with the queens would be completely dead here after the pawn simply runs a4, a5, so on. There's no way that black can stop this now with so little material on the board. They can't even make counterattacking chances. So I thought that queen e3 was the most principled way to approach this position. Queen c2, there's nothing majorly wrong with keeping material on the board as well. When you're up so many pawns, especially when they're on the other side of the board, you're not really at risk of losing, even if you give away a couple pawns, and even if you give a couple of checks to your opponent. Although this, is a little bit scary, and as I mentioned, I would have just traded the queens off. If you calculate precisely, then this should not be an issue either, because now, although black has won the f3 and the h2 pawn, who cares? This a6 pawn is just way too strong here, and that becomes super clear. After a7, there's nothing to be done here. Queen to a6, the king comes to b3. We have the pawn running to h4, black realizing they can't do much, because after queen c4, you're hitting the queen, hitting e6. Queen to a1, you have to maintain control over the promotion square, but a very beautiful tactic soon came after queen e6. And here, ladies and gentlemen, queen to e4 and knight to e5. A beautiful idea. You're hitting g6, which is very difficult to defend. And, well, why can't I just take the knight obviously the pawn promotes. If you take with the bishop, the queen now controls the a8 square. This was the idea of moving the knight away with tempo, basically, because if you take, we promote. If you take with the queen, we can promote. We can also just trade queens first, simplest to promote. So black gave a couple more checks, but ultimately, after knight d3, they threw in the towel because there's no more checks whatsoever. There's no way to stop the promotion, and white is winning. So a fairly simple endgame, not too much to it, except I think it does reinforce the idea of trading when you're up ahead, because you did see that black got some checks, got a little bit of counterplay, not something that you really need to allow from your opponent. But of course, the main takeaway from this video, this nice tactic, knight to b6, and after knight e2, queen f8, a nice pattern. You're probably not going to apply this exact pattern to your games, but it's still undeniably beautiful to look at. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe for more chess content just like this one here, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.